Thank you, Samira, and good morning, everyone. And first of all, apologies. It's always a bit of a risk having someone called Rain open your conference, but it does seem that I truly have brought the weather with me. So apologies for that, but well done on making it here. I want to start by thanking the Advertising Association, the IPA, and ISBA for bringing us all together. It's great to be back here, opening a conference for one of our brilliant members in the heart of Westminster in this decisive year for the UK and global politics. I'm sure you've all heard how this is the year of democracy, when more than 2 billion people around the world will be voting in elections. In the UK alone, there are English council elections, by-elections, London mayoral elections, the Welsh First Minister selection, and of course, the big general election. That's a lot of political debate. And I want to talk today about something I know will resonate with advertisers, cutting through all that noise, because there will be a lot of noise. It's just one of the reasons the UK's 37 billion advertising industry is so important. As well as being one of our core creative industries, a vital part of our global expertise in services. I said at the CBI's Countdown to the General Election conference in November, standing right here, that the UK is a nation of storytellers. No one embodies that better than the advertising industry. Because when customers are overwhelmed with choice, advertisers use stories and narratives to distill the important information, cutting through all that noise and getting the information to the people who need it. Well, among all the political narratives for voters to choose from this year, there is a crucial economic narrative we must never lose sight of. It's a story we see right across the UK. The need for growth that is sustainable, not fueled by pre-election giveaways, but one that is predicated on the bedrock of stability. One that focuses on the UK's amazing capabilities and sets out a clear, long-term plan to make the most of them, which we stick to. We could even call it an industrial strategy. One which creates an economy with skills for the future, with businesses able to invest and innovate, that is competitive on the global stage, so that we can have sustainable growth to help tackle the cost of living crisis that is sadly still biting for so many people. Last year, GDP growth was just 0.6%. And for this year, we're forecasting growth of just 0.8%. And we are one of the more optimistic forecasters. That's the economic narrative we have, and we must do better. Our members recognize that across all sectors, regions, and nations. They tell us that what matters most to them in this election year is driving that long-term sustainable growth. Businesses can't go to the polls, but they do need a voice, and that's our job, to cut through the noise and keep politicians of all parties focused on driving sustainable growth for the good of all. So how do we do that? Well, for growth to be truly sustainable, it must prevent persistently high inflation. Business investment is set to fall by 5% this year, in part because of higher interest rates needed to help bring inflation down. As one business leader told me recently, they don't want to see tax cuts driven by short-termism, which then leads to higher interest rates. They just want stability so they can invest for the future. To fund our public services with an aging population, we need to keep large-scale tax cuts off the table. We must build resilience in our economy and our society, while enabling us to play our part in mitigating climate change. And that takes investment, both public and private. Above all, it must come with real investment in people's skills and capabilities, in infrastructure and innovation. In other words, it can't come from short-termism or tinkering around the edges. To start developing that common vision for the long term, the CBI has published our business manifesto. Co-created with our members, it draws on insights from firms of all sectors right across the UK to set the UK on a roadmap to growth. It includes big choices in 3 areas. First, making the UK a trusted destination for investment. To get to the heart of this, our team at CBI Economics did extensive interviews with business leaders about what influenced the choice to invest in the UK. 1/3 of the firms we spoke to said, over the last 7 years, they have lost investments because of UK-specific factors. And that rose to 38% of foreign-owned firms. Over half expressed a negative view about the UK as a place to invest, rising to 90% of UK-owned firms. There was a sense that without bold action, the UK's competitiveness is slowly drifting away. The solution is not to rest on our laurels. We need to make decisions quickly and strategically. That means a more agile and proportionate approach to regulation that puts investment above politics, with regulators well-resourced to do their jobs quickly and efficiently. We can't lose out on life-changing new medicines because the MRHA doesn't have enough experts on hand. Local authorities must be enabled to decide about net zero housing to meet both local and national need. We need a strategic approach to grid connections to prioritize decarbonisation across industry. We must also strengthen our pitch to international investors. We can do that by building on the great work of the Harrington Review, by delivering an investment strategy, and by bolstering the Office for Investment. And we can go further with a trade strategy that backs our strength in services as the world's second largest exporter of services. Second, we need to be open to talent. Here, the choice is not only easing labor shortages by helping people to find and stay in work, but to use all the tools available, including immigration, to unlock investment and transform the economy. Immigration has become political, but it doesn't need to be. We can be more confident in setting out a balanced view. Our research shows that 2/3 of firms have been hit by labor shortages in the last year, and over 1/3 have been unable to grow as a result. Immigration restrictions are exacerbating that, and firms are worried about the working visa salary threshold, the rise in that threshold coming in April. As an immigrant, both from and to the UK, I and many business leaders I speak with feel we should be celebrating more the contribution that immigrants make to our economy, whether they come here to study, work in our NHS, or lead our world-beating businesses. Construction firms have told us there are currently 41,000 vacancies across their sector, and the changes to the salary thresholds for immigration could affect 5,000 more jobs, increasing costs and affecting government projects. In universities too, one member told us even the announcement of a consultation on the post-study work visa has started to hit international student numbers. And yet, each year, overseas students add £42 billion to the economy. Third, we need to make sure we have green growth that benefits everyone. And this too cannot get lost in political debate. To reach our net zero target by 2050 will take raising green investment from around £10 billion per year currently to £50 billion per year by 2030. The majority of that will need to come from the private sector. But public sector investment in green technologies is essential as a catalyst to crowd that investment in, whether that is de-risking sustainable aviation fuels through contracts for difference, or helping our public buildings to move to low-carbon heat, and our social housing sector to insulate homes, lowering bills. Just look at the Port of Tyne, a fantastic CBI member I had the privilege of visiting 2 weeks ago. Last year, they secured over £100 million for their Tyne 2050 project, half catalytic public investment, half all-important private sector investment, all to help decarbonise. But in the UK, overall public sector investment is too low and too volatile. The average OECD country invests nearly 50% more than the UK does per year. Public and private sector investment is not an either-or choice. One follows the other. And over the next decade, all investment will need to align to a net zero economy. It's just a matter of how quickly we get there. And the evidence is clear. Failing to invest now means higher adaptation costs in the long term. So our choice is doubling down on investment or losing the chance for growth and incurring bigger costs down the line and a worse outcome for our planet and our society. So we need the courage to look to the long game. Now, all of these three things are big choices for our economy, and they call for bold moves in response. That's the message we're taking to politicians and civil servants. In meetings with Gareth Davies and Ed Miliband last week, in meetings across all parties ahead of the election. The good news is right now we have a receptive audience. There is a political consensus on the need for long-term sustainable growth. We saw it in the autumn statement when the Chancellor delivered some important policies that the CBI had long been calling for, like permanent full expensing for investment, like strengthening the focus on occupational health to support people back into work, and reforming the grid connection process to cut project waiting times. We saw it just last week when the Labour Party set out at their business manifesto and took up our manifesto recommendation to set out a business tax roadmap in the first 6 months post-election and committed, importantly, to keep full expensing. And we will continue to build on areas of consensus and ambition for the UK, so businesses have the stability and certainty that they crave. Now, in this year of elections, we need all parties to stay the course on the economy and have the courage to look to the long game. Yes, there will be more big choices to come, but sometimes the boldest move is to build on what's already there. The autumn statement laid the foundations for growth, and we have urged the Chancellor to use the spring budget to firm up those foundations. So I want to tell you just 3 of those smart, targeted moves he can take on March 6th and why they matter. First, improving investment incentives. Making full expensing permanent for investment was a building block for our growth, and our analysis shows it can boost investment by up to 20%, or 52 billion by 2030. Now, the Chancellor should extend that scheme to leased assets. Even though renting equipment can be one of the best ways for firms to access new technologies and good for the planet too, the system doesn't include this at the moment. Our research shows as much as 40% of firms would invest more if there were full expensing for renting and leasing. Second, helping tackle the rising costs for businesses and people across the UK. In our research, the firms we spoke to who were negative about the UK as a place to invest said the top reason was the rising costs of business. For many businesses, their property tax or business rates bill is set to increase by another 6.8% in April. And this will impact some of the large retailers and employers in retail, hospitality, and manufacturing. Our business manifesto calls for the next government to prioritise rates reform to help businesses invest in our high streets. And in the short term, we're asking the Chancellor to cap the increase at 2.8%, in line with where inflation is likely to be in spring. We need that to hold down the costs of doing business, allowing firms to do more to tackle the cost of living. Currently, firms are discouraged from donating unsold stock by our tax system. But if the government expanded VAT relief to exempt charities and companies, When goods are donated free of charge, companies could give a greater volume of essential household products to struggling families, and we would see less waste in our economy. This is a policy also backed by the Coalition of Compassion, which Gordon Brown will talk about later here today. Third, government can help support people, help support businesses get people back into work and stay in work. Government's childcare announcements was a great step that could help as many 60,000 parents into work. But we must now deliver on that and make sure all parents can access high-quality childcare places. As one parent said to me when my kids were young, your career is only as good as your childcare and the flexibility and support your boss gives you to be both a great parent and a great employee. We have to look at our health too. Currently, a record 2.8 million people are out of work due to long-term sickness. We provided expert advice to the government on designing occupational health tax incentives to help change that. And we could go further by removing some of the tax barriers so employers can focus more on preventative measures. A great start would be making Employee Assistance Program a fully tax-free benefit. That's a smart intervention that can support many people, bolster our workforce, and firm up the foundations for growth. And look, we all know that growth doesn't happen overnight. There are no quick fixes. It's only going to come from a national movement to support, over the long term, sustainable growth across the UK. A consensus across politics, sectors, and regions, business and government. But we can do it. And our promise to you is that the CBI will keep championing that cause, working with government, civil servants, and politicians from all sides of the House, driving partnership and consensus for the benefit of everyone. Thank you.